war against Islam. It was, after all, the Islamic prisoners tortured in Abu Ghraib, and it was as well the Islamist party Hamas that was targeted for destruction by Israel. In each of these cases, the precariousness of the Islamic population was heightened. In European politics, you witness a different front of this war in immigration politics. And this very often has taken the form of defending Europe against racial diversity, but also against the imagined assault on its treasured freedoms that people from Muslim countries are thought to plot and perform. As part of a queer movement for many years, I am sensitive to this language of freedom, and no one wants his or her sexual freedom restricted by religious means. But I am also sensitive to the ways that claims of sexual freedom have been spuriously used to limit immigration, just as spurious uses of feminist principles were used to authorize the war on Afghanistan. The queer movement, conceived transnationally, has also sought to fight homophobia, misogyny, and racism. And it has operated as part of an alliance with struggles against discrimination and hatreds of all kinds. The emergence of a queer politics was meant to confirm the importance of battling homophobia, no matter what your identity or your sexual practices happen to be. But it was also queer, the signal of the importance of alliance, an attunement to minoritization in its various forms, a struggle against precarious conditions, regardless of identity, and a battle against racism and social exclusion. Certainly my own affiliation with queer was meant to affirm the politics of alliance across difference. Broadly put, a strong alliance on the left requires a commitment to combating both racism and homophobia, combating both anti-immigrant politics and various forms of misogyny and induced poverty. Why would any of us be willing to participate in an alliance that does not keep all of these forms of discrimination clearly in mind, and that does not also attend to the matters of economic justice that afflict sexual minorities, women, and racial and religious minorities as well? It is perhaps important to remember the importance of the critique of state coercion and state violence for a robust left political movement, even as we recognize that transnational economic, including state institutions, are responsible for differential and widening poverty levels. So this leads me to my final question. Do I want the state, any state, to take up its defense of my sexual freedom in an effort to restrict immigration on racist grounds? What happens when seeking recourse to the protective actions of the state, in turn, augments and fortifies the state's own power, including its power to articulate a racist national identity? And what happens when lesbian and gay freedoms are instrumentalized to harass religious minorities, or to make sure that new immigrants can be denied entry on religious, ethnic, or racial grounds? Under these circumstances, sexual progressives have to become critical of the state that appears so enthusiastically to be supporting our freedoms, including our freedom to marry. What precisely is it doing, the state, with our freedoms? And are we willing to have our claims to freedom instrumentalized for the purposes of a racist reproduction of European national identity through restrictive and coercive immigration policies? If the fortification of the state against established and new immigrant communities involves depriving them of freedom, questioning their own rights of assembly and expression, if it casts its own Muslim population as a threat to the value of freedom, then it protects one claim of freedom only through the intensification of unfreedom, through the augmentation of the state's own coercive mechanisms. There are surely better strategies than appealing to a state that makes use of the defense of freedom to reassert its national purity, its racist conceptions of culture as the precondition of reason, modernity, and civilization, and to halt all public criticism of the way it polices its borders and patrols its minority populations. A racist discourse can recast itself as the necessary ground of morality, or indeed modernity, reformulating its own hatred as moral virtue. Some crucial part of freedom of speech does involve speaking out, which means invariably speaking out within specific scenes of address, speaking with and from and to one another. This implicit sociality in every mode of address demands the recognition of freedom as a condition of social life, but also, crucially, a condition that depends upon equality for its actualizations. We know this from Marx. At stake is rethinking the processes of minoritization under new global conditions, asking what alliances are possible between religious, racial, and sexual minorities when these positions are less identities than modes of living in relation to others and to guiding ideals. Then perhaps we can find constellations where the opposition to racism, discrimination, precarity, and state violence remain the clear goals of political mobilization.